Alright, so we're going to take a look at fractions. And what is a fraction? A fraction is a number which describes the relationship between the whole of something and its part. So say we had the number 2 over 3. We could see here that this 3 would be called a third, and you can see here we have 2 thirds. And that 2 thirds would be 0.6 in decimal form. We have a dot there just to show that that 6 goes on and that it's a recurring decimal. And we could also, obviously this here would be called our numerator, and this here would be called our denominator. And we could also flip these numbers around, right? So we could have the 3 on top, and we could have the 2 on the bottom. And in this case, this will be called a top-heavy fraction because the numerator is greater than the denominator. That would equal 1.5. We could see here that we could also convert this top-heavy fraction into a mixed number simply by carrying out the operation. We know that there's 1, 2 in 3, and then there will be a remainder of 1 after that, so there will be 1 over 2. And we can also get that whole number back into mixed number form by simply multiplying the 1 by the 2, and then multiplying the 1 by the denominator, and then adding that to the numerator. So we'll have 1 times 2, which is 2, plus the 1, which is 3, and we converted it back again into its top heavy form. Alright, so what about if we wanted to multiply two fractions together? Let's say we had the fractions 2 over 3 times 3 over 2. Well, the process is very simple. With multiplication, we just multiply the denominators and multiply the numerators across, so that will be 3 over 2, 3 times 2, which is 6, and that will be over 6. And notice here we have the fraction 6 over 6, and that will just equal 1. This is a very important concept which we will encounter a bit later when we're adding and subtracting fractions. Alright, so we have 2 times 3. Alright, so this is our fraction, 6 over 6, and that equals 1. Alright, so now what if we wanted to add together two fractions? Let's have a look at that. So let's say we had the fraction 7 over 12 plus 5 over 12. Now notice here that they're both 12ths, right? They both have the same denominator, so we have 7/12 plus 5/12. And so because they're both 12ths, the answer is also going to be a 12th, and we simply add the numerators together. So we have 7 plus 5, which equals 12, and again we have that similar fraction of 12 over 12, and that will just equal 1. Alright, so the general method for adding and subtracting fractions is to A, make denominators the same, and B would be to add or subtract numerators, and finally our step C would be to simplify the expression. Simplify. Alright, so let's take the fractions 3 over 5 plus 2 over 7. So our first step is that we would want to make the denominators the same, and in order to do that we would want to find the lowest common multiple of both of these numbers. And since both of these numbers are prime, the process is very simple. We just have to multiply them together. So 5 times 7 would be 35, and that would be the multiple which is common to them both and the lowest possible. So now we have our lowest common multiple, so the LCM is 35 is our LCM. The next thing we want to do is I'll just write these fractions again, but just give a little bit of space. So we'll have 2 over 7. Alright, so now as mentioned before, we wanted to make our denominators the same. And so in order to do that, I would like to make this 35, right? This denominator needs to turn into 35, and this denominator needs to turn into 35, so they can be added. So in order to do that, I'm going to multiply a fraction. So to get 5 to 35, we multiply that by 7. And I will put another 7 on the top here on the numerator to balance the books. So we're going to multiply the denominator by 7, and we're also going to multiply the numerator by 7. And if you notice here, we have that similar fraction that we saw earlier. We have 7 over 7. And if we notice that 7 over 7 equals 1, so this fraction has the effect, it doesn't really change the value of 3 over 5. It's like multiplying 3 over 5 by 1. It doesn't change the value of 3 over 5. However, there's just some slight mathematical manipulation going on here. So now we're going to multiply this 2 over 7. We want to make this 7 35. So the number that we're going to choose is 5. And we want to do the same thing to the numerator. So we have 5 over 5. And we already saw earlier about how to multiply fractions together. It's simple, just multiplying the denominators across and multiplying the numerators across. So our new expression would look something like this. We'll have 5 times 7, which is 35. Excuse me. And we'll have 3 times 7, which is 21. And we'll have here we have 5 to 7 times 5, which is 35. And we have 2 times 5, which is 10. So you see here now we have the same denominator for both fractions. So we can now share that common denominator. Here is 35, and then we'll simply add the numerators. We'll have 21 plus 10, and that equals 31 over 35. Alright, so we've seen an example of when both of our denominators are both prime numbers. We simply just multiplied both the numbers together to find the LCM. However, now we're going to have a look at subtracting two fractions which have denominators which are composite numbers. Alright, so what if we had the fraction expression 1 over 16 minus 1 over 108. Now, since these are both composite numbers, the process of multiplying both of these denominators together is not quite a simple one, because we won't be able to find the lowest common multiple that way. Instead, we'll have to use a method called prime factorization, and what that effectively does is that it breaks our denominators down into their prime parts so that we can handle our multiplication. So let's start with 16 first. We have 2 times 8, and we'll break that down further into 2 times 4, and we'll break that down further into 2 times 2. So what we have is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, and that is 2 to the 4. And we'll do the same thing with 108. We'll take 108, which is 2 times 54. That 54 is 2 times 27. And 27 is 3 times 9. And finally, 9 is 3 times 3. And that equals 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 3, which is 2 to the 2 times 3 to the 3. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is we want to select only the highest powers to multiply together. So if we notice here that 2 to the 4 is a higher power than 2 to the 2. So we're going to select 2 to the 4 to multiply, and we'll multiply that with 3 to the 3. So we're multiplying the highest powers together. So we have here 2 to the 4 times 3 to the 3, and that equals 2 to the 4, which is 16, times 3 to the 3, which is 27, and that equals 432. So our lowest common multiple here is 432. Alright, so let's just clear this screen away, and so we have more space. So now I'm going to rewrite this as 1 over 16. We'll give a little space. That's going to be 1 over 108. And then we've already selected our our lowest common multiple as 432, and so we want to make this denominator, we want to turn this denominator here into 432 and also this into 432. And so in order to do that, this 16 would have to be we know that 16 is 2 to the 4, and 432 equals 2 to the 4 times 3 to the 3. And so to get 16 to 432, we just have to multiply it by 3 to the 3, which is 27. And of course, we do the same thing to our numerator to balance the books. Alright, and so now we want to do the same thing to this fraction. We have 108. We know that 108 equals 2 to the 2 times 3 to the 3. And so in order to get 432, we need to multiply this by 2 to the 2, which is basically 4. So we can have here our 4 over 4. And so now let's just rub our bottom equations out. Just to make some space. So now we have 16 times 27, which is 432, we know that. And 1 times 27, which is 27. Then we minus, we have 1. We've already gone over how to multiply two fractions together. It was just a simple case of multiplying across the denominators. So we have 108 times 4, again, which is 432. And 1 times 4, which is 4. So we have 27 over 432, and we have minus 4 over 432. So our common denominator would be 432, and then we'll simply say 27 minus 4, which is 23, and there's our answer, 23 over 432. Alright, so I haven't forgotten about division. Alright, so let's say we have 2 over 3, and we want to divide that by 3 over 2. Well, the process is very simple for division. We simply flip this around. So we would say 2 over 3, and once we flip that around, so we flip this around and we change this to a multiplication sign. So that's just 2 over 3, and that's flipped around, that becomes 2 over 3, and then we just handle it like a simple multiplication. So that would be 9, 2 times 2 is 4, and then we have it. We have another example. Let's say we had 5 over 7, and we wanted to divide that by 2 over 9. It's just a simple case. We flip it around and multiply it by the fraction. So we have 5 over 7 times 9 over 2, which is, you have the 14, 45.